Omar, your friendly neighborhood library man. I am here with a brand new video. If you are watching this now, you probably know that Halloween is right around the corner, and Halloween is actually one of my favorite times of the year. I love this time of year because it gives me an excuse to catch up on all the weird, spooky stuff I've been hearing about all these past, 11 other months. And I'd like to share that with you guys. There's a lot of really weird things that we have hanging around here in this library, and I know that if you have some time on your hand, and if your reading list isn't already too big, you might want to take some recommendations. Each one of these videos I'm going to be recommending something a little bit different, but the first thing I wanted to talk about is actually the history of horror. A little bit of a minutia in terms of horror history. You've probably heard of Bram Stoker's Dracula or Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, to name a few, the works of Edgar Allan Poe, some guy named Stephen King. But what I was thinking about in particular was that in the 70s there was a major horror resurgence, and a lot of that is due to three particular novels. Three novels that we actually have here, and I'm going to talk about all three of them. The first one is Ira Levin's Rosemary's Baby. A lot of you may have heard of Rosemary's Baby from the movie with Mia Farrow, directed by Roman Polanski. Rosemary's Baby was a book before that, and what we have in the library is the 50th anniversary edition of it, with a really cool foreword by David Morrell. And for those guys who don't know who David Morrell is, he's the guy who wrote the first Rambo movie. That was based on a book too, so hey, you're learning about two movie adaptations in one video. So Rosemary's Baby, of course, is about a young woman who, due to some shenanigans, winds up in a very odd predicament involving a New York apartment, her very secretive husband, and possibly a coven of witches. There's a good chance you guys already know about the plot of Rosemary's Baby, and I'm just being really coy about it. But Rosemary's Baby was a really fascinating book about what it means to be a young woman in a world where people just don't want you to make your own decisions. And it's strangely relevant for a book that was written in the 60s to come out now and still hold a lot of the same themes then nowadays. And if you like that, speaking of Ira Levin, we also have his other book, The Stepford Wives, which was also turned into a famous movie twice, actually. One good, one terrible. I would recommend that if you are going to read an Ira Levin book, definitely check out Rosemary's Baby, but this one is here for anybody who may not be familiar. So those are two Ira Levin books. The next one, this one's probably even more famous than Rosemary's Baby, and that is William Peter Blady's The Exorcist. This is the 40th anniversary edition of The Exorcist, and again, much like Rosemary's Baby, there's a good chance you know what the plot is of this book. Hey, it involves the devil, and a little girl, and somebody throwing a pea soup on a bunch of people who are trying to excise the devil. I saw that movie probably way younger than I should have been to see that movie, but I loved it. I've read the book, and I think the book is actually really cool. If you are familiar with The Exorcist mainly through the movie, definitely give the book a shot, because the book has some really, really interesting stylistic choices, and Blady's a very interesting author in trying to get people into the nitty-gritty of the narrative. So that's that, but we also got something else too. See, Blady also co-wrote the screenplay for The Exorcist, and he later had a career writing both novels and movie scripts. One of those scripts he tried to turn into a sequel to The Exorcist, mainly because he realized as he was getting older there was less of a chance to make it, and that book was called Legion. Legion is something I highly recommend if you are only familiar with Blatty's work through The Exorcist. Like I said before, The Exorcist is a classic, but Legion I think gets slept on a bit. It actually follows a character from The Exorcist in a completely different case, one that involves serial killers and dissociative identity disorder, and again, more satanic shenanigans, because you're probably noticing a trend in these books. Funny enough, Legion was actually turned into a movie later on, directed by Blatty, and that was The Exorcist Part 3. So, weird how these things work around, but yeah, I highly recommend both these books. Again, if you are familiar with The Exorcist and haven't read Legion, definitely read it. Now, I mentioned that there were 3 books that made the 70s really big in terms of horror fiction, and the first 2 you've probably heard of. The last one was something I didn't hear of, but this was a monumental bestseller, and it just disappeared. And that is The Other by Thomas Tryon. Fun fact, Thomas Tryon was actually an actor before he even considered writing a novel, and The Other is, well, compared to the other 2 books which I mentioned, this one's definitely the black sheep of the family. This one also got a movie adaptation, but I don't know anybody who has actually seen that movie adaptation. Tryon's novel is about twins. One of them good and the other one sadistic. And the whole book is structured like a, how can I describe it? Almost like a Victorian mystery. I mean, it takes place sometime in New England, and a bunch of murders start happening, and people start suspecting other people. So it's creepy, it's really captivating. And like I said, if you're familiar with those other 2 books but never heard of this one, definitely give this a shot. So you're probably wondering too, like, Omar, why do you waste my time talking about books only you care about? Well, but that's a very good question. My cameraman's nodding at me, so I completely agree with that. But these 3 books, the reason why I bring these up is because I think horror as a genre gets slept on more than almost any other genre out there, with possibly the exception of romance. But even then, romance you're more likely going to see on a bestsellers list than a horror novel, unless that horror novel is written by Stephen King or Dean Koontz. But the thing about these books is that they do have a place in literary history, especially like if you want to at least take a dive into horror, and if you're not familiar with it, and if you want something that might stand out a little bit more than a lot of the big commercial books that come out now, you might as well jump into where a lot of this all began. Because if it wasn't for these 3 books, there's a good chance we probably would not be buying more horror novels for the collection, which I'll get to at some point. But in the meantime, if you're looking for Halloween reading, this is a good chunk to get you into it. In the meantime, I'm Omar, this is the Ridgefield Park Public Library, and I'm saying happy reading.